When I was around 20, I attended school at a widely popular university in Illinois. I won't disclose the name of it. I'm not getting paid for advertisement, but let's just say it was a really good school. I spent my time studying my field in computer science, which is what I was majoring in at the time. If I remember correctly, it was my second semester in college during the fall of 2014. Computer science is not an easy major, and you had to know what you were doing if you wanted to get ahead in the field. Long story short, while it might have been difficult, I still had a passion for it. My major also required you to take some heavy exams, which was a huge part of your grade. This often resulted in me being in my dorm to study for long hours of the day. While all of my friends were out at frat parties, I'd be in my room learning as much of the material as I could. There was this one night, however, where something happened that will never leave me. If I could remember correctly, it was during the week, and I was in my dorm doing my usual routine of staying up late to study. I hit the books for a few hours until around 1, where I then decide to call it a night. Right then, I, for some reason, get a weird feeling from being alone in the room. Keep in mind, I'm very comfortable when it comes to staying in my dorm, so getting this feeling was bizarre. Too tired to care, I try to get some shut-eye when I hear the closet door slowly creak open a bit. It was an old closet, so I didn't really think anything of it and just brushed it off as the ventilation. However, that was when I heard what sounded like faint breathing coming from the closet. At that point, I knew my mind wasn't playing tricks on me, and I've seen too many horror movies to ignore it. I take out my iPhone and turn on the flashlight while pointing it at the closet. There, standing about 6 feet tall, dressed in dirty clothing, was a man staring intensely at me. I screamed at the top of my lungs as I saw what I was looking at and ran out of my dorm so fast. Fortunately, we have campus security that walk around at night, and one of them happened to be around to assist me. I stand out in the hall as I watch this officer walk into my dorm, coming back out with this thin, disheveled-looking man. However, he didn't try to get away, but rather accepted his loss. It didn't take long for police to arrive and take him away, as police tend to take their jobs very seriously around here. Turns out, the man was actually a homeless squatter who had snuck into the building because of an open back door. The reason he had snuck in was because he needed warmth, as it was freezing outside. Needless to say, he went to jail, but I still felt a certain degree of sympathy for him. Temperatures drop into the 30s during this time of year, so I could imagine how he must have been feeling. I stayed in that dorm for about 2 weeks after that, before switching to a new one on a floor below. I have no idea why the back door was left open, but it was probably due to carelessness. Anyway, that's my story, and while I don't think his intention was to harm me, it still creeped me the hell out. For some context, this happened when I was 22 while attending school from out of state. I had spent nearly 4 years studying my field of interest, and graduation was only 1 semester away. I had to take another semester as the university had messed up one of my classes that I wasn't even supposed to take. Needless to say, instead of reimbursing me or waiving it, they simply marked it as one of my electives. It was a stupid decision, but whatever. Anyway, every semester the school had required all students to change their housing contracts and switch dorms. I'm still not sure about the reason for this, but I found it unnecessary in my opinion. The first day of classes came around, and shortly after, I was introduced to my new roommate. His name was Gabe, and had actually been doing the same major as me. He seemed okay, although a bit off, but I really couldn't put my finger on it. He would sometimes give me dry responses or not say anything at all whenever I tried to make small talk with him. Needless to say, he wasn't a people person and was very socially awkward. Sometimes I'd come back from class to find Gabe just sitting at the edge of his bed staring at the wall. I'd say hi most of the time, only to either get ignored or a dry response. He'd stare at the wall for hours on end, even if it meant missing one of his classes. He said it felt peaceful. I have no idea what he meant by that, but I just kind of minded my own business. Over the course of a few weeks, I'd come to my dorm to see him eating my food. The crazy thing is that when I caught him doing it, he didn't stop. He just continued eating as if he didn't care. I didn't mind it at first, seeing as there were small snacks, but as it progressed, I told him to please stop. I guess it seemed to work, as my food stopped disappearing. Fast forward about a week later, I get out of class with a friend and head down to the auditorium so we could study together. I know, not the ideal place to study, but it was always empty except for when performances were happening. We go inside and find a small place in the back to study when she looks by the stage and sees someone. It only took me a few seconds to realize that it was Gabe approaching us while giving us a wave. The girl I had been studying with had asked if I knew him, to which I explained that he was my roommate. He walks up to us and stays silent for a few seconds before saying hi and walking off. I could read him like a book and knew there was definitely something off about him. We shrug it off, and after studying, she was nice enough to drop me off at my dorm. I thank her and told her I'd see her tomorrow and that perhaps we could study again before heading up to my room. I go inside, and this time on the edge of my bed is Gabe sitting in the dark. In a confused tone, I ask, "Dude, what the hell are you doing sitting in the dark?" He apologizes, telling me he was just bored and goes to his bed and clearly pretends to fall asleep. Not wanting to pry and too tired to care, I turn off my light and get about a good 2 hours of sleep when I was awoke to a noise. It only took me a few seconds to realize what it was, but I then realized that it sounded like water. I turn on my light and see Gabe pouring some sort of powder into my water bottle. He sees me and immediately puts the bottle down on my nightstand and says he was just sleepwalking. That was it. I told him he had officially crossed the line and went down to the front to report him. Gabe, of course, denied any wrongdoings, but when I showed security what he put in my water, he was arrested. Turns out, the powder he had put in my water bottle was tracking powder. It's a very dangerous substance used to poison rodents such as rats and mice. Honestly, if I hadn't woken up, I probably wouldn't have been writing this right now. I'd like to think that Gabe had went to jail, but I'm not 100% sure. 2 days later, I was switched with a new roommate who wasn't the best, but better than Gabe by a landslide. The semester was over in the blink of an eye, and I was eventually able to graduate on time. It wasn't until 4 or 5 years after where something happened that sent chills down my spine. I had now been living with my girlfriend, the same girl I had studied with back in college. We had lived in an apartment and both had good jobs. One day, I had been out of town visiting my parents a few states away. I had been shopping at their local supermarket to get them food when I thought I noticed someone awfully familiar by the checkout lane. It took me a few seconds, but I then came to the realization that it was Gabe. He didn't see me, and I didn't want to take any chances of going up to him, fearing of what he'd do. After that, I never saw him again, and never told my parents or my girlfriend. There was something about his face that just gave it away, that it was 99.9% him. I have no idea what he was doing in my parents' city or what he was up to now. I just pray that I don't see him again. This story is told in the perspective of a female. This took place when I was 19, back when I attended a community college in my city. It definitely wasn't the school of choice, but going to this college only increased my chances of getting into the school I wanted. At the time, I was majoring in communications. I know a lot of people say communications was a useless major, but it was a very wide field, hence why I chose it. My first month of college went alright, but being a shy teen, I didn't really have any interest in making friends. Say what you want, but I was one of the few people that found a private life relaxing. There was, however, this one person in my biology class who I seemed to get along with. His name was Brian, and as much as I never thought I'd say this, we connected really well. I'd like to point out that I have autism, so it's sometimes difficult for me to interact with others. For some reason though, I found him very relatable, and we hit it off well. We'd talk over FaceTime and even hung out at the dining hall once in a while. One day, out of the blue, Brian comes up to me and asks me if I could be his girlfriend. At this point, I'm shaking with anxiety as I wasn't sure how to respond to that, but in the end, I agreed. I'd say things went decently normal for a few weeks, but that was when I started to see the real Brian. The whole time, he'd treat me like a queen, invite me to a few frat parties, talk way late into the night, all that stuff you'd expect from a real relationship. But he started asking me things he shouldn't have known about. Things I've discussed with people outside of school, things I've talked to family about, and even things I've mentioned to other people in real life who he didn't know. Out of curiosity, I confronted him about this, but he then claimed that he had overheard it in one of our video calls. Being dumb, I brushed it off and dismissed it as a misunderstanding. But that was when he said something that kept me away from him. He had asked me about how Julie was doing. Julie was my little sister who had unfortunately died in a car accident about 13 years ago. I have no idea how he knew about her, as I've never talked about it and none of my parents have social media, so she was never talked about online. I blocked his number and wanted nothing to do with him anymore. Weeks went by with him attempting to reach me, but I've always ignored or blocked him. A month went by and I hadn't seen Brian in class for a while, and that was when I learned from another classmate that he had been arrested. Turns out, his dorm was raided by police who had seized his laptop for the possession of illegal content. I'm not gonna say what it was, but you get the idea. From that point forward, I've always been very careful around who I meet. I never saw Brian again, and I haven't heard any updates on him.